Oklahoma GOP governor signs anti-transgender bathroom bill into law. Now, I'm going to read this first sentence of this article, and this is pretty much all you need to know. The question is how did we get here that we needed a law like this? Like, what happened? What happened? That's what we're going to be talking about. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Sean Reynolds. I own a couple of real estate companies. We talk about stuff like this because why wouldn't we? All right, let's jump on in. Let's get to it. I'm dying to read this first paragraph because it's like, all right, this is from CNN. All right, we're going to the heart of the matter. It's got to be. I mean, where's Wolf Blitzer when you need him, right? Right? I mean, back in the day, that was great. Now CNN, not so much. You don't know what you're going to get. But I've vetted this article, and you know what? They're kind of pissed off that they're having to write this, so I'm happy to cover it for you. Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt on Wednesday signed into law a bill that requires students at public schools and public charter schools to use restrooms and locker rooms that match the sex listed on their birth certificates. If you were born a dude, you got to use the dude's restroom. If you were born a woman, a girl, you got to use that restroom. That's what we're doing. And we need a law to identify that. We do. Huh. It's wild, isn't it? You're like, okay, this is pretty basic stuff here, but it's not, is it? Because we've got, well, I'm identifying as this, I'm identifying as that. I need you to respect this about my sexuality. And some states are saying, no, whatever's on your birth certificate, you use that restroom. But they do have a backup plan. I'm going to talk about that in 1 second. Let's keep going. The law specifically applies to students in pre-K through 12th grade at public charter schools in the state. Transgender students who decline to use the restroom required under the measure would have to use a single-occupancy restroom or changing room provided by the school. All right. Okay. So it's not like they can't use the restroom. They've basically got one that, all right, it's single use. Only one person can go in there at a time. What are we trying to avoid here? What is the bottom line? If you were to break this down into what's the essence of this? So when I was in elementary school, my mom had me go to this Bible study called Line Upon Line. I know what some of you are thinking. It's like, oh, geez, what's that all about? But one of the things that we focused on was taking like a couple of pages and dialing it into one sentence. I always remember that because it taught me to read a whole bunch of stuff and then mentally cut it down into what is the essence in one sentence. And oftentimes I'll ask people to start babbling to me and talking to me about stuff. And I'm like, all right, can you break this down into one sentence? And they're like, oh, and they'll do their best. But some topics can't be broken down into one sentence, but oftentimes they can't. Here's the thing. If I were to break this one down into one sentence, here's what I would say. We don't want dudes in girls' restrooms, right? I mean, that's essentially what we want. We don't want that, right? I mean, we've seen what happens when transgendered folks are in the prison system and women end up pregnant. I mean, did we not see that one coming? How'd that happen? I mean, they're trans and these people are, just biological females and they're procreating in prison. Oh my gosh, that's not good. Parents of daughters don't want trans dudes in their daughters' restrooms. That's kind of the bottom line. A trans girl walks into the guy's restroom. They're just not going to do that, are they? No, they're not going to do that. That's not even a thing. You might argue with me on that one, but I'm going to draw that hard line in the sand and say, you know what? You know what's reasonable here? It's dudes and girls' restrooms. They don't want that. And I don't really blame them. That's not, men use their restrooms, women use their restrooms. That's kind of where I sit on this one. And so does the Governor Stitt in Oklahoma. Now, if you follow this podcast, I go down to visit my parents in Oklahoma City, and it is a different world down there. It is far more reasonable. It's wild. It's just like, where am I? Well, I am in Oklahoma City. All right. Look at the map, and that's where you are. All right. Some different stuff going on there than Seattle. My parents, I don't know if they can comprehend what has happened to Seattle because they spent, 20 something years here. I was raised here. I still live here. And if they came back and kind of saw some of the stuff going on, I think they'd be like, oh, geez, let's go back to Oklahoma City. At least we know where things stand there, right? And where things stand here in Seattle, but a lot of folks, they just don't want to deal with the nonsense going on in Seattle on a daily basis. It's crazy. The measure, back to Oklahoma now, and the governor and him doing reasonable bills. The measure, which cleared the state legislature last week, will take effect immediately because it was passed with an emergency clause. They're going ham on this, aren't they? They're in. The governor's in. And I've read other topics about this governor, and, they take a hard stand, and they're just, all right, this is what we think. And every time I read it, I'm kind of like, well, that makes sense. Yeah, selfishly, I am so happy that I don't have children in the educational system right now, because what a mess, what a disaster. Or I don't have an infant that needs baby formula, because that seems to be as hard as masks were to find at the beginning of the pandemic, or a COVID test when we really needed them, right? How do we get to a spot where there's not enough money in the baby formula industry, so we only got a couple of companies, and you take one of them out, really restrict that down. Plus, we're shipping a whole bunch to these other causes and things that by law have. I mean, they're going to get some of the baby formula, and so then regular tax-paying parents. Yeah, check with your doctor. Had this conversation literally a few days ago. The woman that I was talking to literally said they were recommended, well, check with your doctor and see if you can get some samples. And like we talked about, all right, how many other parents have probably gone to their doctors doing the same thing? You should be able to go to the store and get some damn formula, right? I mean, if that's how you're feeding your kid, crazy times. School districts that fail to comply can have a portion of their state funding cut and could be sued by school parent. You're going to have all kinds of litigation over this stuff, right? You're going to have some parent who supports their kid, in third grade being transgender, suing an entire school district, and it's just going to go back and forth. How about that Johnny Depp trial, right? That thing's wrapping up. I was watching 𝐏𝐞𝐚𝐬𝐥𝐞, what's her last name? Johnny Depp's prime. The attorney. I mean, it's kind of the good-looking younger one that apparently Johnny Depp may or may not be having, a little relationship with. She's certainly a pretty good lawyer, in my opinion, because she kind of looks like she's not that aggressive. And then when she starts talking, you're like, oh, yeah, okay. She's a ball breaker. She's just going to go after somebody. And sometimes those are the best lawyers out there because, men go up against those lawyers and they just get beaten down because the man comes across as aggressive. And that's just how it goes. And whoever Johnny Depp's, his legal team, they figured all this out. And I don't know who's going to win in that case. I think both of them come out as essentially losers because so much of their dirty laundry has been aired. I mean, the Johnny Depp, he's going to the mat on this one. I mean, is it worth $50 million? Amber Heard's at $100 million in her lawsuit. Are either one of them going to come out on top? I don't think so. Attorney fees alone, Johnny Depp spent around $5 million and Amber Heard probably at $3 million. Johnny can probably afford that way more than Amber. And at this point in time, it's more about the remaining golden years of his career, which I believe were impacted by some of his own behavior. Did some drugs. I mean, guy hangs out with Hunter Thompson. he's going to do a lot of drugs, and maybe it impacted his career. And I think down the road, he could do some more movies, and I think he will. It'll be interesting to see if Johnny Depp rises up out of the ashes. Amber Heard, I believe, is toast. And I just don't like her. I've never really, I mean, she's cute, but her acting skills, I don't know. I'm just never a huge fan, but there's a lot of people I'm not a huge fan of. Let's get back to Oklahoma and them doing reasonable things with restrooms in schools, right? Oklahoma has been front and center in this effort to basically work on the whole anti-trans thing. They've got 100 anti-trans bills this year with particular focus on transgender students. Oklahoma's been front and center in this effort, with Stitt having signed at least 2 other bills restricting transgender rights this year alone. In late March, the governor signed legislation banning transgender women and girls from competing on sports teams consistent with their gender at public schools. If you're trans, you can't compete as a woman if you were biologically born a man. Again, it's kind of like that first paragraph in this podcast. Do we even really need to state this? I mean, to me, we are stating the obvious. All right, if you're a dude, you use the dude's restroom. Okay? I mean, that seems so basic, right? But no, we're at a situation. I think if you told me as a kid, hey, there's going to be a point down the road where, it's going to be a little murky which restroom you use. And I think I would have said, why? You know what I mean? And I still say that. Why? Why are we even having a debate here? This isn't even up for debate. And yet it is, because we've got to put bills in place, if you're a conservative state, to make this go. State of Washington, we're probably going to do whatever the opposite of this is. Whatever the opposite of this is, we're going to do. That's just what we do here. We're very inclusive. We're all whatever. And last month, Stitt signed a bill that bans non-binary gender markers on birth certificates in the state. Let's talk about that for one moment. You can't have non-binary as a gender on your birth certificate. Again, I go to, well, that's pretty obvious. You're born either a man or a woman, right? I mean, biologically, there's no in between. You might identify as something else, as non-binary gender, but the hardcore reality is you got to pick one. You got to go with one. Which one is it? And that's the way you were born. So we've got that. So we've got laws like this. All right, boys use the boys' restroom, whatever sex you were born as, that's what goes on your birth certificate. You can't have non-binary. And a bunch of other laws that basically break out simple biological kind of rules that we use to run society. And yet we're going down these other ways. It's okay to identify as whomever you want. And if you want to identify as those, that's fine. But, we've got other stuff we got to consider. And essentially, this article is dudes can't go in the women's restroom. Trans dudes can't. And that's what we're saying here, right? Advocates have for years worked to combat bathroom laws like the one signed Wednesday, criticizing them as unnecessary and harmful attack on a transgender student's humanity. No, I mean, I'm not really seeing it that way. All right. Is it unnecessary and a harmful attack on a transgender student's humanity? I'm not really seeing it that way. The way I view it is that having a trans man in a women's restroom could be a harmful attack on the girls using that restroom. That's the way I see it. So there's that, right? And I think that's the way the governor of Oklahoma is seeing it as well. By singling out transgender students for discrimination and excluding them from restrooms that match their gender identity, for singling them out for matching up their gender identity. State Bill 615 discriminates based on transgender status and sex in violation of the United States Constitution and Title 9 of the Civil Rights Act, ACLU of Oklahoma. Okay, whatever. These violations put Oklahoma at risk of losing hundreds of millions of dollars in federal funding and harms transgender youth, all to solve a problem that plainly does not exist. Well, I think the parents of children who are having opposite sex walk into their restrooms, they might disagree with you on this being a problem not existing. I think that's where we're going with this. That's just my opinion, though. Yeah, that's where we sit. Young transgender Americans make up a tiny fraction of kids in the U.S. United States Center for Disease Control and Prevention has estimated that less than 2% of high school students identify as transgender. But that is rising, isn't it? Yeah, we didn't really have any, and then now we've got a bunch, and it's doubling every so many years. Why is that? Are just all of a sudden more people just realizing that they're trans and they need to go a different direction? Or is it because it's popular? It's a popular thing to do and people are encouraging, other folks to do it. Hey, it's okay. It's all right. There's probably some of that as well. Healthcare professionals have said that the types of bills Republicans are pushing are likely to further ostracize transgender kids. Transgender kids they're already ostracized, right? You're not this sex. You're not really that sex. You're somewhere in the middle. We're not really sure. We're confused. You're confused. The whole thing it's difficult. It is problematic. But for the large majority of kids in the school system in Oklahoma, this is the direction they're going. They're going to, all right, you use that restroom, use that restroom. If you can't figure out which one, use this one where you're not impacting others with your identity. And that to me seems fair. All right. Does it ostracize transgender kids further? I don't know. I'm not sure what ostracizes transgender kids. I just don't really know. And from that standpoint, it's like, okay, the vast majority of the kids are not transgender, so let's figure that part out, and we work on that, and we provide a solution for the transgender kids, and this bill does that. So, it seems reasonable to me, but folks on the left are going to say, can't have this. And transgender kids are a group that already struggles with higher rates of depression, anxiety, and suicide. So they're at risk already just by basically identifying who they are, right? We know that statistically. So, there's that. But you got to deal with everybody, the whole pie. You got to deal with the whole pie. And I think this bill does what it needs to do. And I think from a reasonable standpoint, this makes sense. Are there states going to follow this? Yeah, probably. They probably will. Are there states going to go the opposite way? Absolutely. That's where we have that, we have that ongoing divide. And people are leaving in droves. And a lot of the sales that we're doing right now, a lot of the listings that we're doing on the Summit Properties Northwest side are folks leaving from Seattle, and they're going to Texas, and they're going to Florida, and they're going to Idaho. They're going to places, they're going to Oklahoma. They're going to places where their values and what used to be, a value of, all right, you were born this way, you go in the boys' restroom, or you go in the girls' restroom. That used to be a given. Now it's not. And so people are struggling trying to figure out, okay, where do we go to figure out others who think along the same lines of us? And that's what's happening. We're seeing it on the real estate end for sure. And people are kind of picking sides and figuring out where they are. I tend to fall on the what's reasonable. What's reasonable? You got to take both sides into consideration. How do you make this go? This bill to me it does seem reasonable. From big picture, from where I sit, it seems reasonable. Maybe you disagree. Let me know in the comments. All right. That's it for me on this one. Thanks so much for being here. And maybe you agree. Let me know as well. I think a lot of folks are afraid to talk about these kind of subjects because you might piss somebody off and then you're going to have the full, coming down on you of cancel culture and all this kind of stuff. But this is a story on CNN and I think it needed talking about. And so I did. That's what we're doing. Thanks again for being here. We'll catch up soon. Talk then. Bye for now.